opportunity to go with my family and visit some extended family in Montana. And on that trip, my uncle decided to take us spelunking, which is it's a fancy word for cave exploring. And so we get all the gear, right? He gives us all these headlamps and stuff, and it's awesome. And so we start out at the mouth of the cave, and we start to wind into the cave, and we turn the corner, and it's like this small room where the natural light kind of fades out. And so we get into that room, and I'm not really sure how big it was at that point, but I know that we were sitting in the middle of the room, and my uncle says, "Turn off your headlamps." And I thought, that's really weird. Why would we turn off our headlamps when we're going into this cave to explore? We won't be able to see anything. And so we sit there with our headlamps off for about 10 minutes. And initially, I put my hand like this, and I can't see anything. Like, it's this close, and I can't see that my hand is there. It's that dark. And so after a couple minutes, I put my hand back up, and I can kind of see like there's a blob there. So I'm like, okay, I can kind of see my hand is there. After 10 minutes, my uncle says, "Turn your headlamps back on." And so we all do. We all turn our headlamps back on, and what happened was incredible and so unexpected. See, we were sitting there in complete darkness for 10 minutes, and our eyes kind of got comfortable and they settled. And then all of a sudden, the lights from our headlamps, we turn them back on, and it almost shocks our eyes open again, because all of a sudden, where when we first entered, I didn't know how big that part of the cave was, couldn't really see much detail around us. All of a sudden, when we turn our headlamps back on, my eyes can see the details of the cracks in the walls and how big the space is that we're in. See, what happens is that your eyes get so comfortable that when the light turns back on, they are more sensitive to the light, and so they see more of what the light is exposing. And it got me thinking, remembering that story, it got me thinking about a passage in John that comes after one of the most popular verses in the Bible, John 3:16. And I want to read this passage to you. It's actually John 3:19. And it's so important. It's even so important to the message that's in John 3:16. So John 3:19 says this. This is the crisis we're in. God light streamed into the world, but men and women everywhere ran for the darkness. They went for the darkness because they were not really interested in pleasing God. See, everyone who makes a practice of doing evil, addicted to denial and illusion, hates God light and won't come near it, fearing a painful exposure. But anyone working and living in truth and reality welcomes God light, so the work can be seen for the good work it is. See, if we stopped at John 3:16, it's a great verse and it's powerful, but it doesn't really show how much of a problem there is and how we interact with God. Because I feel like sometimes in our relationship with God, we kind of stop at John 3:16 and we kind of say, yes, I believe in Jesus and I accept him, but we don't really want a relationship with him. And so just like in this verse, we play this game where we step into the light of a relationship with God for maybe a couple hours during the week, Wednesdays and Sundays, or maybe we kind of put on this face around certain people from church, and yet the rest of our life is spent kind of away from this relationship with God, away from the light that a relationship with God can have in a life. So we spend our times the rest of our time in this darkness, and we try and we think that we get good at hiding what we're doing in the darkness, the choices that we're making, the ways that we act when we hang out with other people. And yet, all of a sudden, I think there has to come to a point where we realize that if we continue to play this game where sometimes we kind of show our face in the light of a relationship with God, but then the rest of the time we hide in the darkness doing other things. The things that we're doing in the darkness, the mess that is being made, and the mistakes and all of the different things are going to pile up. And pretty soon, they're going to come into the light. And eventually, we're going to be exposed. And see, a lot of times we think that that's what God is wanting to do. God is only wanting to expose the dark and the bad places in our lives, to point out how imperfect we are, and to put us on blast. But in reality, that's not what God wants at all. You see, in this verse, Jesus talks about how God's light has entered the world, but for the most part, we kind of shy away from it. And he's almost saying, like, if you would only lean into the light, lean into a relationship with God, allow God into those dark places, those places where the mess is, before the mess gets out of control. Because in reality, if we sit in darkness for so long, and if we spend most of our time in darkness, just like in that cave, we kind of settle, we kind of get comfortable, we kind of feel like, no, I'm getting good at hiding this. I don't need God's help with this because I got it under control. And yet, when the lights get turned on in our lives, when things start to spill into the light, when we can't hide it anymore, that's a painful exposure because our eyes are shocked open, right? The spiritual eyes in our lives are shocked open. The light turns on and you can see everything. See, the reality, what Jesus is saying is he wants to avoid the painful exposure. The times in our lives where we think we're getting good at hiding it, and then all of a sudden it comes out and we're left with this mess, right? See, it may be hard, and it may be just a little bit painful to admit that we're imperfect. But what Jesus desires and what God desires is for us to live our lives fully in the light of who he is. Because when we do, yes, we're going to have mess in our lives, and maybe living in the light means that people will see that mess. But if we can admit that we have that mess, if we can admit that we're not perfect before that mess gets out of control, then God can help us do the hard work of daily starting to clean out the dark places of our lives, starting to clean out the messes that we find ourselves in, and starting to look to other people around us and starting to guide them into a life that is in the light. You know, the best part of that cave exploring experience, it wasn't searching and finding things in the caves or anything like that. It was actually at the very end, when we finally came back up out of the caves. And I know that sounds funny, but when you're down in the caves, all you have is your headlamp, and the light that it casts, you can see everything, but it's all kind of gray. There's not much color, and there's not much vibrancy. And so when you're down in the caves for so long, the minute you come back up into the sunlight, like, it's really bright at first and you're kind of squinting, but then all of a sudden you just start to take in the color and everything around you, the sky, the grass, the trees. It all looks more beautiful because after spending so much time in dark, kind of gray light, coming into this bright light that shines and brings color to everything around you, there's something about that. And I think the same can be said when we step into a light and a full relationship with God, fully in his light. Our life becomes more vibrant, it becomes more colorful, it becomes more purposeful. You see, this isn't some abstract idea. And if we step into a full relationship with God, where we're stepping into the light and saying, I am going to be from this day forward real with myself and with others and with God, then all of a sudden the choices that we make, they have more of a weight behind them, because if we make a choice to do something when no one else is around, that affects our relationship with ourselves and with God and with others. And we start to think about how those things impact that. We start to think about how we treat other people. We start to think about how they might have their own darkness and their own issues. And so we're slower to judge, which then means that when we make a mistake, others may be slower to judge us. So living in the light is living a life where you don't have to be scared that someone's going to find something out about you, but you're free to live in the fullness of God's love and show that love to others because you have nothing to hide anymore. And so today I want to challenge you to kind of start to search in your life. What are some areas? What are some choices? What are some things that you know you're not supposed to be doing? And how can you allow God to begin to work in those areas? begin to step into those dark places and shed light into those places so that you can begin the work to be transformed and the work to clean those places up. That doesn't always come easily to ourselves. Sometimes we have to involve other people. And so if this means that you need to reach out to myself or Pastor Andrea, one of the youth staffers, to begin to have a conversation, to work through these types of things, then I encourage you to do so. But the key is to not stay hidden in the dark and only come into the light every once in a while, but to live a life that is fully free, fully vibrant, full of life by living into the light of God.